Jimmie Johnson expected to buy an ownership stake in Petty GMS Motorsports and make select Cup Series starts in 2023. And Ty Gibbs speaks to the media, and Noah Gragson calls out Ty Gibbs. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We've got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're going to start paint schemes and sponsorship news first. Let's jump those really quickly. The first paint scheme we're taking a look at is Todd Gilliland's 2022 Boot Barn scheme that will be seen this weekend at Phoenix. Decent looking paint scheme, in my opinion. Not my favorite Todd Gilliland scheme I've seen, but good to see that Boot Barn is going to be moving up from the Truck Series to sponsor Todd Gilliland this weekend. Next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Daniel Suarez's 2022 Free Rate Insurance ComScope scheme. Honestly, not a great paint scheme. Probably one of my least favorite track-out schemes I've seen so far. I don't think the colors mesh as well, but Kyle Sykes has done a really good job on the paint schemes this year. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ricky Stenhouse Jr.'s 2022 Fry's Nature Valley scheme that will be seen this weekend at Phoenix. Honestly, this paint scheme's okay. It's not fantastic. I don't think the colors mesh that great, but good to see this car will be on the racetrack this weekend. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Chase Purdy's 2022 Ibaraki scheme that are going to be seen tonight in the Truck Series race at Phoenix. Decent paint scheme, in my opinion. Love the colors on it, and hopefully this truck will have a good run. And the final paint scheme we're taking a look at is Joe Graff Jr.'s 2022 ArmsList.com scheme that will be seen tomorrow afternoon in the NASCAR Xfinity Series race. Solid looking paint scheme, in my opinion. Do like the colors overall, and I hope that he can have a really good run in this car to end off the 2022 NASCAR Xfinity Series season with a good run. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Oasis in the Sky. Now, if you're going to Phoenix International Speedway this weekend, you're going to see something very interesting if you're there. So, they've already kind of started doing this tonight, or when I'm recording this, but basically there's going to be some sort of Oasis in the sky. And Phoenix is going to have an Oasis in the sky this weekend at Phoenix. 12 people will basically be able to go up into seats for 30 minutes each. I think it's select amount of money you have to go ahead and pay, and you'll be able to go up into the sky. Honestly, I think this is really cool that they're doing this. I was like, what the hell are they doing? But honestly, I think it's very intriguing to see, and we'll see if people decide to go try this out. I think it's pretty cool they're doing it, and very solid to see for sure. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Indy Lights. As was announced earlier today, that Indy Lights is going to become Indy NXT. Indy Lights will be rebranded Indy NXT. Basically, the second series, this IndyCar series, before jumping IndyCar, will be called Indy NXT. I liked Indy Lights a lot better than Indy NXT, don't get me wrong. They also did reveal the 2023 Indy NXT schedule as well. I think they're going to run 16 to 18 races next year, very similar to the length of the IndyCar schedule. I don't like the name as much, but they're rebranding it and they're trying to change the brand. It's interesting to see for sure, but I'm not as big of this fan of this move, in my opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Menards. As it was announced earlier today, that Menards is going to be partnering with Junior Motorsports in 2023. And they're going to sponsor Brandon Jones in every single race in 2023 in the 9 car. I think this was a very expected move. Menards has been a big backer of Brandon Jones really since the beginning of his career, whether they go back to ARCA, whether they go back to Trucks, or even Xfinity when he was at Joe Gibbs Racing or Rich Schultz Racing. He's had Menards backing him. So I'm not shocked and surprised that Menards will continue to work with Brandon Jones next year, but it's good to see that he's got full season funding. It's always difficult sometimes to get full season funding, so for them to have a full season sponsor, I think is really great to see, and happy to see that we'll see Menards sponsored in every single race. Very happy to see for sure, in my opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Road America. As was announced earlier today, that the Road America repave that's been going on really since the end of September has been officially complete from all 4 miles. This is expected to be done really quickly. They said it was expected to be done within a month, and now they've got the reef pave complete. What I'm really hoping is the racing does not suck, especially when the Xfinity Series does return in August. I think August or July of next year. Hopefully the racing will end up being really good. And they definitely need to repave. They've been talking about repave for a while. So for the repave to be finally done is really good to see, and happy that the repave at Road America has been officially complete. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the Chicago Street Course. As according to Adam Stern, it is reported that NASCAR says it will spend at least $50 million on Chicago Street Course for everything that they're going to be putting into it. And it's also expected that the investment is expected to be earning $113.8 million. That is a huge number. I'm going to be for real. I was expecting it to be around $10 million, maybe $20 million for this event. I think they'd be spending $50 million. That is a ton of money for one big event. But I think this tells me that there's some big stuff that they're planning on. The fact they're spending that much money tells you that there's a ton of things and ton of events that are going to be going on around the racetrack and more amenities around the racetrack as well. But still, I think that's a lot of money. They could have put that in a lot of different things, including maybe, just spending some of that money on Rockingham and maybe North Wilkesboro. Just saying. But especially for a new event, I'm not surprised. It costs a lot. I'm just shocked it's that much. That is a lot of money. $50 million is an insane amount of money. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the Brazilian Grand Prix. As it has been reported by multiple reporters, the Brazilian Grand Prix will go on as planned. There have been some rumbling rumors going on in the Formula 1 paddock that there was talk that the Brazilian Grand Prix was actually going to be canceled. But that basically got denied yesterday. And the reason being is because of the fact that there was a basically election that happened in Brazil. And that kind of has caused some protests and caused some riots as well. It's good to see the Brazilian Grand Prix is going to be going on. We've seen sometimes when Formula 1 races have gone down. There's a lot of people, including Nelson Piquet, have shown their frustration with them running the Brazilian Grand Prix. But it means now we'll have 2 Formula 1 races left instead of 1. If they would have canceled Brazilian Grand Prix, there would have been only 1 race left in the season, and that would have taken place at Abu Dhabi. Of course, so Max Verstappen has already locked up the championship. Though it's good to see it's back around, I'm a little bit surprised they're continuing, but again, they've sometimes have had big events in Formula 1 happen, including in Jeddah, where you had missile strikes basically going on there just miles away from the racetrack, and drivers didn't even want to race, but I'm not surprised that they are racing. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Rick Hendrick. As Rick Hendrick was on Sirius and NASCAR radio a couple days ago and being interviewed by media, and Rick Hendrick says and gives huge respect to Chase Elliott and Alan Gustafson. He basically says what Chase Elliott's thinking is that he thinks he's got the smartest crew chief in the garage, that being Alan Gustafson, and shows a lot of respect to Chase Elliott as well. This isn't a major shock or surprise. A lot of people give Alan Gustafson a lot of crap because we see him sometimes make the not the greatest calls in the world, but Alan Gustafson has a chance now to become a champion once again in the Cup Series. I think he's won 1 or 2 Cup Series championships already. He's won a lot of races with many different drivers, including Kyle Busch, nearly won with Terry Labonte. Labonte wasn't great in 2004, but Terry Labonte was under him. And also you did have other drivers like Mark Martin and other people work with him as well. Honestly, it's really good to see that he's giving him a lot of praise, because especially when you look at Rick Hendrick and what he's been able to accomplish, and also what Alan Gustafson and Chase Elliott have been able to accomplish, you're never going to break that duo up unless Alan Gustafson decides to retire, which Alan Gustafson is probably not going to retire anytime soon. This pairings work really together, though, and I think for many, many years it will continue to work and will continue to be extremely successful long term, in my opinion. So amazing to see that their pairing continues to work as good as it has, in my opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Dale Jr. As this is reported by many reporters, including Chris Knight and Dustin Albino, among other reporters, that Dale Jr. will not be on the NBC broadcast for the Xfinity Series race at Phoenix Raceway. The reason why he will not be on the broadcast is because he will basically be in the pit boxes of all 3 Junior Motorsports drivers. There will be 3 Junior Motorsports drivers competing for the NASCAR Xfinity Series Championship: Justin Allgaier in the 7, Noah Gragson in the 9, and the number 8 car for Josh Berry. Dale Jr. is going to want to focus on that. It's kind of unfortunate Dale Jr. is not going to be in the booth, but I don't think Dale Jr. wants to show his bias and wants to focus on being a team owner in their race. He does focus on being a team owner for a lot of time, but Kelly Earnhardt a lot of times does run the operations for the team and really helps out there. But I think it makes a lot of sense that Dale Jr. will not be in the broadcast booth. It sucks, don't get me wrong, but I think it's a great decision for Dale Jr. to not be in the booth, especially since he does not want to show his bias. I think it's a great decision for Dale Jr. It does suck, because I would love Dale Jr. to be in the booth and see his reaction on his YouTube page later, but it's not a major shock or surprise that he will not be in the broadcast booth. Not surprised by the decision in the slightest. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Justin Marks. As Justin Marks shared a very interesting tweet out on Wednesday evening. And basically he's interested in wanting to test 850 plus horsepower at Charlotte with 5 different cars. This tweet got a lot of intrigue. People with engineering degrees, including Brian Murphy, who is an engineer for Stewart Haas Racing and a big engineer as well, was very intrigued about this. And a lot of people are also very intrigued by Justin Marks' tweet as well. First of all, I definitely love them to try 850 plus horsepower. But what I'm a little worried about if we do increase 850 plus horsepower, which is something I don't think they're planning to do anytime soon, I think if you increase it up to 850 plus horsepower, I don't think the next gen cars are going to be as good on the intermediates. I think 670 horsepower is perfect for the intermediate tracks. What I will say needs to be fixed is the short track product. I would like them to test 850 plus horsepower, maybe on the bullring track that is there, that's quarter-mile bullring track that is there. I think it'd be good to test that out and see what happens. But if this does end up going through, I think it'd be really exciting to see for them to test 850 plus horsepower. I think it'd be very fun. I definitely would be very intrigued. Maybe we'll see more drivers get involved. I think drivers do want a lot more horsepower, don't get me wrong. The short tracks and road courses need more horsepower, but I don't think the intermediates do. But I think it's a good idea to try it and see if 850 plus horsepower work. I like to see how it would work, and if it would work, we'll have to wait and see what happens, but there might be some testing going on in regards to that in the future if it does get approved to be tested. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Austin Hill. Now, Austin Hill, earlier today, he actually ended up releasing a statement in regards to his actions at Martinsville. For those who are unaware, after the NASCAR Xfinity Series race, there was some contact between Maya Steiner and Austin Hill on track. Austin Hill actually got into Maya Steiner, spun about, and caused that big one with around 35 to 40 laps to go in the race. On pit road after the race, Maya Steiner confronted Austin Hill, and Austin Hill kept telling him to back off multiple times. Maya Steiner kept confronting him, and Austin Hill got into a fight with Maya Steiner and basically punched him straight in the face and got into a fight. Now, basically, some people thought he officially apologized to him, but Austin Hill clarified he was not apologizing to Maya Steiner. He basically reiterated that he's sorry for what happened there. Honestly, I'm not surprised that Austin Hill basically is not getting in trouble. Honestly, some people thought he was going to get in trouble, but Wayne Otten is someone, who, of course, who runs the competition director and all that kind of stuff. He does a lot of that stuff. He did not officiate. He's a big officer, so he did not officiate and penalize him for the fight. I'm definitely a little surprised there wasn't any sort of penalty or fine, but again, they don't usually fine people for fighting, so I'm not surprised there. But Austin Hill basically clarifying, basically saying he was not apologizing to Maya Steiner, I think is very, very funny. They are supposed to be meeting later today. They're expected to meet later today and talk to each other about what exactly happened. Hopefully, we won't see fisticuffs there. Honestly, when it comes to the situation with Austin Hill, he's a bigger dude. He does martial arts. You don't want to mess with Austin Hill. He's a guy you don't want to mess with, and Maya Steiner was basically confronting him, and he got what he deserved, in my opinion. If you're going to confront a guy who has a lot of that experience, you don't mess with a guy like Austin Hill. He's a big bubba. You don't mess with him, and I'm surprised that Maya got involved and tried to fight him. I think it was a bad decision on Maya's part, and it's not a major shock and a surprise to me that he got into a fight. I'm not really surprised in the slightest, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Auto Club Speedway. There's a lot of media availabilities that are going to be happening we'll be talking about here throughout this episode. The first one we're talking about is Auto Club. As there is an announcement, according to Joseph Strigley, there's a media availability and announcement that is scheduled for Sunday, November 6th, I believe at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 11 a.m. Mountain Standard Time at Phoenix Raceway surrounding Auto Club. Now, we already know at this point that 2023 will be the final race on the 2-mile configuration before we do switch to the short track. What I'm thinking it's going to be is that they officially have gotten that approved, and they're going to be confirming the short track switch. There's been a lot of talk about approval processes. A lot of people want this move because some people don't really want this move for Auto Club to happen, because especially after a really good race in the spring of 2022. And while I really don't want this move to happen, I'm very worried that if a repay does happen, the racing product isn't going to be as good. Granted, you have a 670 horsepower package, which I think will produce a better race than a 550 package race would, or basically a race with the old Gen 6 car. Now, the Gen 7 car could still race with a repay, but I am very, very worried that I don't know how the short track product will be good. Hopefully by the time we do get to the short track, which will be 2024, when they do switch to short track, because the first time we'll have a short track race is 2024. There's also a possibility, maybe in 2024, they decide to move Auto Club to the season finale as well. Some people think there's a very good chance of them making it a short track with like a town surrounding it. There could potentially be a possibility that they do go ahead and switch it and have it as season finale in the future. It's out at the West Coast, would make a lot of sense. Sorry, Daytona and the Auto Club would make a lot of sense if it is a short track. We'll definitely have to wait and see what happens in regards to this, but that announcement is coming here in the not-so-distant future. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Zane Smith. Now, Zane Smith spoke to the media during championship meet availability days on Thursday, and Zane Smith said that he hopes to run around 5 to 6 Cup Series races in 2023 for Farmer Motorsports, starting with the 2023 Daytona 500. This is nothing new. Zane Smith has said this a couple times. He plans to run around 5 to 6 Cup Series races next year in 2023. Including the 500, we already know that's the first race he's going to run. What will the number be? I would think the number is going to be 36. That's been in Farmer's arsenal for a very long time. They ran the number as soon as 2019. They almost ran in 2020, but they did run that number in 2019. I think they also ran it maybe a year or two ago with David Reagan as well. So that's probably the number they're going to run for Zane Smith. Zane Smith also getting Cup experience is really good. This won't be the first time that Zane Smith has raced in the Cup Series, as he actually did substitute for, I believe, Chris Buescher at Worldwide Technology Raceway, aka Gateway, and is technically his NASCAR Cup Series debut. So he's got some Cup Series experience. I think getting Cup Series experience makes a lot of sense, especially I do think long-term, in the long-term futures, I think he will end up being the replacement for Michael McDowell in 2024-2025. I think that's why they kept him long-term, because he's got a multi-year deal to be with the team. A lot of people do think that he probably will have an opportunity and a chance to potentially eventually go maybe to RFK Racing long-term. Some people think that they should try to RFK should try to court him over, especially since I think Farmer does have a little bit of an alliance with RFK Racing, but I don't know if that is going to happen. That being said, though, getting that Cup Series experience makes a lot of sense. I think he runs the Daytona 500, the Coke 600, Chicago Street Course I think he's going to run. I think he runs the season finale at Phoenix, and I think he's going to run maybe other playoff race like the Southern 500. I think that's 5 of the races he'll run, but we're definitely going to have to wait and see what happens for sure in regards to that. But it's good to see he'll be getting some Cup Series starts in 2023, in my opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Christopher Bell. Now, Joe Gibbs was speaking to media in regards to Christopher Bell, and Joe Gibbs talked about why they signed Christopher Bell to a long-term deal. Now, over the last couple of weeks, there's been some things that have come out to show that Christopher Bell has signed a long-term contract extension with Joe Gibbs Racing. He had a contract through 2022, and there actually have been some rumors at the time that Christopher Bell was potentially going to leave the 20 car, but as his performance has really improved, especially throughout the year, and him being the championship 4 now, he's not going anywhere anytime soon, and he's got loyal sponsors in funding. Remo will be returning to the team in 2023. The Wall will continue sponsoring, and he's got sponsors that are willing to work with them. And with a guy who's already won 3 races here and could go back-to-back and get his 4th win and win his first championship at the young age of 26 or 27 years old, it makes sense to keep Christopher Bell. And you need to keep these younger guys in, because one of the issues for Joe Gibbs Racing right now is they don't have a lot of room for the upcoming guys. Christopher Bell's a guy they can really build around. Now, he's got a little bit of experience. He's been in this series for 3 years. And in a few years' time, he will be 30 years old. And it ain't going to be long for guys like Martin Truex Jr. and Denny Hamlin to retire. Martin Truex Jr., he's 42 years old, will be 43 in 2023. Denny Hamlin in 2023, he'll be at the end of the year around November 18th, 43 years old. So he's definitely getting up there in age as well. So you have to start thinking about that as well as a major possibility. We're going to have to wait and see what happens with how long Christopher Bell stays. I think Bell will be at the team at least for another 5 or 6 years, which by that point, you'll have Ty Gibbs likely in the 18 car, and probably some other drivers from the lower ranks like a Sammy Smith perhaps jumping up and racing. We'll see what happens, but Christopher Bell has a long-term deal with the team, and it's a really good explanation why they decided to keep Christopher Bell long-term, in my opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to go ahead and talk about the number 41 car. Now, the number 41 car for Stewart-Haas Racing has been a car that's been in major conversations. Well, on Wednesday afternoon or Thursday morning, Bob Pockrass reported the decision to will be coming later this month in regards to who is going to be driving the 41 car for Ross Racing in 2023. Now, a lot of you think, well, that right should be set right because Cole Custer, a lot of people think, will return to the 41 car. However, there's been a lot of rumblings and rumors that there is a potential possibility in 2023 that Ryan Preece could drive the 41 car in 2023 because Gene wants to keep Cole Custer in the 41 car in 2023, but Tony Stewart, the other owner of the team, wants to go ahead and put Ryan Preece in the 41 car. Now, if I have my choice in saying who gets in the 41 car, I think Ryan Preece would be a much more fit candidate to drive the 41 car. This is no disrespect to Cole Custer, but Cole Custer in 3 years in the Cup Series, he has struggled. He has struggled immensely. His performances have not been there, and he has not performed to a good enough level to keep that number 41 car. I think you put Ryan Preece in a 41 car, that car will actually make the playoffs or nearly make the playoffs in my opinion, and will actually do a better job running up front. Now, Cole Custer, I think if there's a chance, he could go to the 15 Rick Ware Racing car, which they do have an alliance with Ross Racing, Rick Ware does, so they could end up doing that. In my opinion, though, if I had to choose, it could be Ryan Preece in the 41, but honestly, there's also a chance Cole Custer could stay in the 41. But in my personal opinion, I am 100% putting Ryan Preece in the 41 car for the long-term success. And then I think in the long term, because Kevin Harvick likely is retired at the end of 2023, and Eric Almirola could leave at the end of 2023 as well, you then bring a guy like, let's say, you bring Cole Custer back and put him in the 10 car or the 4 car. You could do that. We'll have to wait and see what happens. So, or put him back in the 41 car and move Preece to the 4 car. It's interesting to see for sure. It's not confirmed he'll be in the 41 car. We may not know until almost a month or two before the season starts, but it sounds like a decision, though, will be coming at the end of this month, probably at the last before Thanksgiving, probably perhaps, maybe the next couple of weeks. We'll see what happens, but the 41 car decision is probably coming very, very soon. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Kyle Busch Motorsports. As it's been basically reported by Kyle Busch Motorsports that they are going to be announcing their 2023 plans later today at 5:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So by the time many of you are watching this video, you already know who will be driving for Kyle Busch Motorsports. What will be announced is that they will be announcing they'll be switching to Chevy for next year. Kyle Busch Motorsports expected to switch to Chevy, and they're planning to have 3 trucks in 2023. One of the trucks I would expect to be an all-star truck. That will be the number 51 truck, and I would think that will be driven by guys like Austin Dillon, who runs some select starts. Kyle Busch will run some select starts. I think Chandler Smith will stay at KBM on a part-time basis to drive the 51 truck, and a couple other drivers in the Chevy pipeline, even upcoming Chevy pipeline, will get an opportunity to drive the 51 truck, including some guys from the ARCA West Series like a Tanner Reeve or other drivers in the series. The other 2 trucks are going to be 2 full-time drivers. Now, who are those 2 full-time drivers going to be? The first one I've heard is Nick Sanchez. Nick Sanchez has been the front runner to get into one of the trucks. Nick Sanchez's name has been brought up by many people in the conversations, in many circles. His name's been circled. He's a really big driver in the Chevy pipeline, and KBM is going to be a Chevy development team. So I think that they're going to bring Nick Sanchez in there, and I think Nick's a great driver. He's done really good with big machine racing this year, and I think he'll be driving one of the trucks. The other driver I think that's going to be driving is going to shock people. Chase Purdy. Now, that's a name a lot of you probably are not really happy to hear. And why Chase Purdy? Well, Chase Purdy on Halloween put out a tweet saying announcement soon. And it's not a coincidence. It's basically not a coincidence at this particular point. That basically at this point, that I think that coincides with the Kyle Busch Motorsports announcement. Another big reason, he's going to be leaving Tory Racing at the end of the season. And I think that with his sponsorship funding from Bama Buggies, which has been a big loyal sponsor of him since the beginning of his career, whether it's been ARCA or trucks, I think that will come with him to KBM next year. Now, looking at this team next year, I think that Chase Purdy actually will improve. I think he's improved a little bit this year, so I do think he will improve in 2023 and contend for the playoffs. As for Nick Sanchez, I think that Nick Sanchez is actually going to have a chance of making the Final Four next year. You're not going to have John Hunter Nemechek more than likely. He's likely going to the 19 for Joe Gibbs and Xfinity. And I think, and we already know that Chandler Smith is going to 16 car for Kaulig Racing. And there's probably other drivers who could move up. We already know that Haley Deegan's in the rumblings that she could be going to Xfinity next year. Maybe it's Ross Racing or SS Greenlight Racing. Who knows at this point. But we'll see what happens to KBM. I think they'll be a decent team. But the announcement will be coming later today in regards to that. That announcement is expected here in the coming days and here later today. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Casey Mears. Now, a good friend of mine, Casey Campbell, did an interview recently with Casey Mears. And Casey Mears says that he's interested in returning to NASCAR at some point, whether it's in Cup, Xfinity, or Trucks. The last time Casey Mears raced in NASCAR was 2019, driving the number 27 for Premium Motorsports when it was before they became Rick Ware Racing, because Premium basically got out by Rick Ware Racing, and basically they took a lot of the assets from that team. Holy crap, that's a name I've not heard in the last couple years. Now, recently, Casey Mears actually raced in the Legends Cup event that happened at the Mexico GP. They had a bunch of legendary drivers from CART and IndyCar driving that, including Casey Mears, Oriol Servia, Paul Tracy, and other drivers competing in that event as well. Casey Mears would be a really cool driver to bring back to the sport, especially since it's been a very long time since he has raced in NASCAR, a few years, but he hasn't had a competitive opportunity. And I'm going to be honest and for real. I don't think Casey Mears was the greatest driver in the world. He was a decent driver and a somewhat okay driver, but he wasn't the greatest driver in the world. He did get a win in the 2007 Coca-Cola 600 and also in 2006 won an Xfinity Series race in the 42 car for Chip Ganassi Racing. And he did have some decent years. 2007, I think he finished 15th in the standings, and in 2006, he finished 14th in the standings and nearly made the playoffs that year. I think Casey Mears would have a fun time. I think it'd be fun for him to come back to the sport for sure and bring another legend coming back. We've seen so many drivers returning. We're going to talk about another driver here near the end of the episode who's expected, and that'll be coming. That announcement will be coming probably time you're probably watching this video. We'll have a video on that here later today. Still, though, a crazy that Casey Mears could actually make a legitimate return to NASCAR. Hopefully he does in the near future. Maybe he drives for like NY Racing, but that number might be off the table for next year with the big announcement coming later today. So interesting for sure that Casey Mears says he's definitely interested in maybe wanting to make a return to NASCAR. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Sheldon Creed. As it was announced on Wednesday afternoon around 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time that Sheldon Creed will be returning to Richard Racing in 2023, driving the number 2 car in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. This is not a shock or surprise to me that Sheldon Creed will be returning to the team, considering I think that Sheldon Creed in 2022 has been one of the most improved drivers from start to end. At the beginning of the year in the Xfinity Series, he did really struggle, had a lot of struggling performances, and at one point was around 16th or 17th in the points. But as years come on, especially through the middle portion of the year, that's when he really started showing up and performing a lot better than he did in the beginning of the year. He started finishing more consistently in the top 10, started having top 5s, and started competing more frequently for wins, including in the Xfinity Series race at Darlington where Noah Gragson won. He was battling with Gragson and Kyle Larson, who was running one of his only few Xfinity Series races of this year. He ended up nearly winning that race. Sheldon Creed is a driver that I expect to take major steps forward heading into 2023. I think he will be an underdog for the championship. I don't think he's going to be the championship favorite. I think you're going to have to worry about guys like John Hunter Nemechek next year, Chandler Smith. You're going to have to worry about the Junior Motorsports camp next year. That camp's getting stronger. Brandon Jones joined the team next year. And you have other talent. But I think Sheldon Creed will make the playoffs easily next year. I think there's a little more in depth going into next year, a little bit weaker of a field, but I do think that he will do very good in the number 2 car next year. And I think he's actually going to win a race or two next year. I think Sheldon Creed picks up that first career win because we're going to be working Austin Hill again. They're two good, really good super speedway racers. I think Sheldon Creed with Wheeling on the board will do a really good job trying to go out there and win races. I think it's a fantastic decision to bring him back for the 2023 year. It makes a lot of sense. He's got Wheeling as a sponsor, and Chevy really likes him. I don't think it'll be long before he's in Cup. I think the earliest he could go Cup racing full-time be around 2024 or 2025, whether it is a Rich Schultz Racing or an affiliate or maybe a third Rich Schultz Racing car, because there is talk that could run select car starts in the Cup Series this year as well. Maybe we're going to see Sheldon Creed make select starts in 2023. We'll have to wait and see what happens, but I think it's a fantastic decision to keep Sheldon Creed at Rich Schultz Racing next year. Very happy to see that he'll be returning to RCR in 2023. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Tyler Reddick. As it was announced on Wednesday, he basically revealed that he's been medically cleared to race this weekend at Phoenix International Raceway. He says he's 100% and he spoke to doctors and he's been cleared by multiple doctors to go ahead and race this weekend. There actually have been a lot of concern over the last few days until this announcement happened that we all thought potentially he was not going to be racing in the season finale. And the reason is because a lot of us thought that he may have had concussion-like symptoms from a crash he suffered at Homestead Miami Speedway. I think around 30 or 40 laps ago in Homestead Miami Speedway, he crashed really hard into the inside wall. And instead of having a rear hit, he hit the front. Now, he basically said he kind of felt fine after that crash, which some people thought he wasn't fine. But he basically said on Sirius and NASCAR radio, speaking, I think it was a Claire B. Lane or Dave Moody, he basically said that he hit his arm really bad, and that's what caused that. I think it was Daniel Tronoff, can't remember exactly. But he hit his hand pretty bad. Now, later that day, and now basically then he said he got hit in the rear of the car, and that's what made him decide to stop because he thought he had a minor head injury. Luckily, though, he feels a lot better, and he's ready to go into the season finale. I'm definitely surprised he's been cleared the race, but I'm very happy he's been medically cleared the race, because I do think that he will actually be pretty competitive in the 8 car. Last time we were here at Phoenix Raceway, he actually was competing for the win late in the race against Chase Briscoe, because the 3 drivers going for the win in the spring were Chase Briscoe, who got his first win, Tyler Reddick at the time, who did not have a win, and Ross Chastain, who is actually competing for a championship here this weekend at Phoenix. He'll basically be back in that 8 car, and I think he'll be very competitive in the 8 car. I think he contends for top 5. I think the top 4 finishers are likely going to be the 4 in the championship 4, because that's how it ends up usually being every year, because the other drivers don't race as hard. But I think it's great that Reddick is going to be back in the 8 car this weekend. I think he's going to be very, very solid, very, very competitive in this weekend as well. Maybe he doesn't push it, though. Who knows? Not to get injured. It's the last race of the year. You don't want to get any head injuries. You have to have a few months to recover, don't get me wrong. But we see the aggression. Who knows at this point? But I'm very happy to see that Tyler Reddick will be back behind the wheel in the 8 car. I think it's good that he's back. Again, I'm a little surprised he's coming back, but I'm very happy that Tyler Reddick has been medically cleared to race this weekend. It's really exciting news for sure, and amazing to see that Reddick has been medically cleared to race this weekend here at Phoenix. Now we're going to jump on to the first of 2 major stories in today's episode, as we're talking more on the major Jimmie Johnson news. Now, there's some big Jimmie Johnson news that we'll be covering here in the episode later today that we'll dive a little more in depth. But according to reports last night from Jordan Bianchi, that Jimmie Johnson is currently finalizing a deal to obtain an ownership stake within Petty GMS starting in 2023, and is expected to run a select number of Cup starts as well. Now, that press conference is going to be going on later today. That is expected to happen around 12:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I think that's when the conference is going to happen. And 9:30 a.m. Eastern Mountain Standard Time is when the press conference is going to happen. Now, jumping in a couple things that I want to kind of talk about. This is a huge deal in regards to this move, Jimmie Johnson by an ownership stake. Because Jimmie Johnson has not been in NASCAR since 2020. The last time he raced was 2020 championship race at Phoenix, where he actually ended up finishing a really good position at 5th. And then Kyle Larson pretty much took over his ride in 2021 with the 5 car. And guess what? They won the championship in 2021, though they cannot win the championship in 2022. That's already big enough on its own. But the other big thing that's kind of another big factor is the fact that he is basically obtaining an ownership stake is really, really huge. Because Jimmie Johnson coming back to sport is huge, by the way, but him obtaining an ownership stake of an organization like Petty GMS Motorsports 18 that is on the up-and-up swing currently at the moment is big. They're a team that has shown so much improvement this year, and they're getting some big assets in 2023 as well. Noah Gragson has had a dominant year in the NASCAR Xfinity Series this year, where he scored 8 wins and could win the championship. Tomorrow, he can end up winning the title and capping off by winning 9 races in the number 9 car. That'd be really, really sweet. But he's got a chance to get that done. Of course, he's going to have to beat Ty Gibbs, which we'll talk about here in a later half of this episode. But basically, he's going to be working with 2 good drivers. Eric Jones, I think, is a top 10 talent in the Cup Series, who's outrun his equipment, got their Petty GMS Motorsports first win as Petty GMS, and also got the 43 car, is 200th win. I think this is an absolutely huge move for this team to bring Jimmie Johnson in. I think the fact that he'll be running a select number of Cup races should tell you how big of a deal it is. We're probably going to know those numbers here in the not-so-distant future, but it's a big deal. Nonetheless, a massive deal for this team, and I'm very excited to see that Jimmie Johnson is going to be on an ownership stake. We'll discuss more about this later today, but a big deal coming on the channel here, and it's a huge deal for this team. And now we're going to jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking more about Ty Gibbs. Now, Ty Gibbs has been one of the biggest stories over the last week. For those who watched the NASCAR Xfinity Series race, you saw that Ty Gibbs basically intentionally dumped his teammate on the last lap of the race and just straight up dumped him in the corner going in turn number 1 and spun him into the outside wall. Now, first thing is that Ty Gibbs actually spoke to Brandon Jones. Basically says he spoke to Brandon Jones when he's speaking to media at Championship 4 media availabilities for the NASCAR Xfinity Series. And he says that he actually spoke to Brandon Jones and he said that he kind of understands where he's coming from. He basically apologized to everybody in the Joe Gibbs Racing team and apologized to the media once again as well. Noah Gragson and multiple other drivers are not buying it. And Noah Gragson basically called out Ty Gibbs, saying that he just does not like Ty Gibbs, the way he races. He says he has 2 goals, by the way. One I think is probably wreck Ty Gibbs, honestly, but the other is to win the championship. But Noah Gragson called out Ty Gibbs today. He basically said that he doesn't like Ty Gibbs. He doesn't like this. He says that he keeps doing this time and time again. He basically says he keeps practice. He basically says practice what you preach at this point and keeps doing that and keeps basically wrecking a lot of people. And Noah Gragson is really, really frustrated. I think what Noah Gragson said today to the media today, honestly, is how a lot of fans feel currently at the moment about Ty Gibbs. Look, I do like Ty Gibbs, and I do understand he's a young driver. But if you're going to be a driver who's going to be in the Cup Series next year, which, let's be for real, he is going to be in the Cup Series in 2023, he's going to have to learn that he cannot race like this. And it seems like it's every other week with this guy that he ends up causing problems. About a month ago at Texas Motor Speedway, we all remember this in the Cup race. He forced Ty Dillon and nearly forced Ty Dillon into a couple pit members that is extremely dangerous, and he should have been suspended for that move. Then on the backstretch, he basically got into the back of Erik Jones and really got Erik Jones really mad and really, really frustrated. Ty Gibbs is going to have a very difficult time racing in the NASCAR Cup Series next year if he even gets in the car. And personally, I don't think he should be racing a Cup next year. I think John Hunter should be driving the 18. But we all know at this particular point that Ty is going to be the 18 car next year. Like I said, going back to Noah Gragson's comments, it's not a surprise. Noah Gragson and Ty Gibbs have had beef before from earlier this year. Remember back in Portland, I think around lap 50 or 60 in the race, or at the end of the race, Noah Gragson got dumped by Ty Gibbs. Basically got completely spun out, and Noah was very, very frustrated. And Noah Gragson even told Brandon Jones at Martinsville that he should go beat the shit out of him, beat his ass, which I think a lot of people want him. Ty Gibbs in 2023 is going to have a very rude awakening, and a lot of drivers are frustrated with Ty Gibbs. Many Cup drivers, Erik Jones, I've seen comments from him. Denny Hamlin says he misses JD. Other drivers, like Kevin Harvick, was really frustrated with them. I've seen Brad Keselowski frustrated. Larry McReynolds, a former crew chief and who works at Fox, he was frustrated in an interview with SiriusXM. Todd Bodine, a former driver, was angry. Jerry Mayfield said the bump and run used to be really, really good. Drivers in the industry and people, I think, are unanimously frustrated with Ty Gibbs. And like I said, in 2023, he is going to have a very rude awakening. I understand he's young, but it's going to be a very difficult time for Ty Gibbs in 2023. He's going to have a very hard time being in this series next year. It's going to be a really rough awakening, and I think that he's going to have a very difficult time surviving in this series next year. And Noah Gragson calling him out. Honestly, if Noah Gragson, if he gets dumped by Ty Gibbs, I think Noah Gragson is actually going to fight Ty Gibbs and actually kick his ass. I really think he is, because Noah Gragson is not afraid to speak his mind. He's a guy that's known to really speak his mind on a lot of things. He made a tweet earlier today, basically making a Talladega Nights quote about Jesus, quintessentially, a kind of thing called Ty Gibbs out for the Jesus comments as well in the media today as well. I'm not surprised, by the way, that basically Noah Gragson showing his frustration. I think a lot of drivers feel that way, and I think it's great that drivers feel the way they do, because I think a lot of drivers are frustrated. We also saw Dale Jr. make comments today, and Dale Jr. says that the more that Ty basically speaks his opinions, I think the better it's going to be long-term. I think something like that. Speaking to NBC Group, basically says that the more he does, the better. Kyle Petty made comments, and I think a lot of fans like myself are frustrated. He's going to have a very difficult time in Cup next year, and I expect that he will have a very difficult time doing things in Cup. He's going to struggle, in my opinion, and have a very hard time being in Cup in 2023. So anyway, that is for today's shorter NASCAR news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so be notified when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, as for me on Patreon as well. Let's go and blow over that and combo your thoughts on today's video. What are your thoughts about Noah Gragson calling out Ty Gibbs? Let me know in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about Jimmie Johnson entering an ownership stake with Petty GMS or expecting to enter ownership stake with Petty GMS? Let me know in the comments below. Later today, we're going to have 2 more videos dropping on the channel. Later this afternoon, we'll talk more about the Jimmie Johnson ownership stake and how big of a deal this really is for the team. I'll go more in depth on that. I gave my initial thoughts on it last night, but I will give more thoughts on that here in the not-so-distant future. And then later on the channel, at the end of the day, we're going to have the championship reactions for the Truck Series. So 3 videos on the channel. This is the first one. 2 more coming out today. Saturday, we'll have the Xfinity Series reactions. And Sunday, we'll have the Cup reactions to the championship as well. So anyway, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode. And I'll see you guys next time for some more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.